Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Morris, and my test exploration is going to be over the Gray Oral Reading Test, otherwise known as the GORT. Specifically, this is the GORT 4. We'll be including some things in regards to the GORT 5. GORT 4 is an earlier edition. The GORT 5 is the most up-to-date edition. The authors of the GORT are J. Lee Wiederholt and Brian R. Bryant. And the publisher is ProEd, 8700 Shoal Creek Boulevard in Austin, Texas. And this is the website which I did use for some of my sources. And specifically in regards to my sources, they'll be included at the end, but they include the testing manual for the GORT 4, an academic article that came from Clemson University, a PowerPoint presentation by a professor at Houston Baptist University, information directly from the ProEd Incorporated website, our Overton class slides, and an Idaho source that is included at the end. It's just an educational website. The date of publication for the GORT 4, which was mainly used for this presentation, was 2001. The 5th edition, which is now available, and as I previously said, occasionally referenced for this presentation, was in 2012. The purpose of the assessment tool and the subtests, brief description of what each subtest evaluates. The GORT 4 is a norm-referenced, reliable, valid test of rate, fluency, comprehension. The GORT 4 specifically is for ages 6-0 through 18-11 and has 2 parallel forms for which to compare. And it is intended to accomplish 4 purposes. Identify those students who are significantly below their peers in oral reading proficiency and who may be helped by supplemental means. To determine the particular kinds of reading strengths and weaknesses that individual students possess. To document students' progress in reading as a consequence of special intervention programs, and the 2 parallel forms facilitate the reliability of obtaining that data, and then to specifically serve as a measurement device in investigation. So people that are studying reading, students' abilities, writing academic papers can use the GORT for measurement purposes for those types of studies. This information was taken directly from the GORT 4 Examiner's Manual. The Overton slides from our class indicate that, see if I can move myself here. The GORT is used to assess the process used in initial and emerging reading and writing skills and for intermediate grades, and these are the subtests: relational vocabulary, sentence completion, paragraph construction, text comprehension, and contextual fluency. Taken from the GORT 4 Examiner's Manual, the GORT 4 yields a variety of scores: total scores, subtest standard scores, and then compiles those scores into a quotient, the oral reading quotient, percentiles, age and grade equivalents. This pretty much reads that then those scores can be used to properly assess an individual's problem and to give an inventory of their reading abilities and skills. So, rate, accuracy, fluency, oral reading comprehension, the combination of rate and accuracy together, indicating what is called fluency for the purposes of this test, and fluency then plus oral reading comprehension gives the data point called the oral reading quotient. So these two equal fluency, fluency plus comprehension equal oral reading quotient. Rate, of course, is the amount of time it takes to read. Accuracy, the ability to pronounce each word in the story correctly. Fluency, the combination of those two. And comprehension, the appropriateness of the student's responses to questions about the content of each story read. Things that we've all gone over before. The normative summary, including the date of the most recent norming and the appropriate age range for the test. We've already spoken a little bit about the appropriate age range for the test, but hold on. The GORT-4 was normed on 1,677 persons in 28 states. The entire sample was collected within 1 year, 99 to 2000. It's appropriate for individuals, as we previously said, from 6 years 0 months through 18 years 11 months. The GORT-5, I was able to find, had a bigger normative sample of 2,556 students in 33 states, and from that they extended the age range, the appropriate age range for the testing, from 6-0 up to 23 years and 11 months. The collection of the normative sample, how the people that were used for norming, was distributed according to geographic region, gender, race, rural, urban, Hispanic, parents' educational attainment, household income, and exceptionality status. And students with disabilities who were enrolled in general classes were included in the normative sample. Reliability. So the types of reliability that are addressed in the test manual will provide a basic overview, and the critiques that I will list will be from other sources and what I could make of it. This was a huge part of the testing manual itself. A lot of it seemed to be above my competency level, but I'll talk about what I feel comfortable talking about. So just to kind of go over the Overton slides again, most of what the testing manual talked about was coefficient ranges. So just to review that, and this is kind of was going into the test and things that we talked about already. So -1 is a perfect inverse relationship or a negative correlation. +1 is a perfect positive correlation, and 0 is no correlation. So numbers that are going to be closer to 1 are better. And the types of reliability was consistency over time, consistency of the items, and the consistency of the scores. And all three of those are covered in the testing manual. Time is, I believe, covered first. We'll take a look at it. Consistency for the two parallel forms, and consistency of scores was inter-rater reliability. According to the Overton, Chapter 4, Slide 11, above 6, or 0.6 is adequate. Above 0.8 is very good. Most of the scores held to that model that were listed in the testing manual. I can't intelligently rate how they did the statistical work, just what they listed seems to match what optimal R scores are. And the way that I made sense of this, at least, was that so if this number is extremely close to 1, then 1 minus 1 is 0, the square root of 0 is 0, or at least close to it, and then whatever your standard deviation times a number approaching 0 will make this number very small, so your standard error of measurement will be small. And the standard error of measurement, small one at least, is good because then that means that your results are more valid and reliable. So having a number closer to 1 is a good thing. So let's take a look at their things here. And this is where they discuss test reliability and true differences. And so with regard to psychometric assessment, tests that have adequate reliability will measure true. So they will yield more or less the same scores across periods of time and across different examiners. Poor reliability will yield markedly different scores when given at different times or when administered by different people. So reliability is extremely relevant, and I think what we just got done discussing in class is that you can't have a valid test that is not reliable. So they put on a self-imposed measurement for tests such as the GORT to be considered minimally reliable. Its reliability coefficients must approximate or exceed 0.8. So they take out that adequate 0.6 and they've made 0.8 their measurement to guide them. And above 0.9 are considered to be the most desirable. They cite a study that said, while preferring the 0.9 value, it is rarely attainable. And in practice, we expect the coefficients to be in the upper brackets of R values between 0.8 and 1. So content sampling, so this would be the item comparison that we previously talked about from the Overton slide. And let's see, the degree of homogeneity among items within a test. So do the items itself, are they relatable to one another and valid in and of themselves? Coefficients for both forms A and B of the subtests are reported in table 5.1. As can be seen, the average coefficients for the subtests and the composite are acceptable in that they all exceed or round to 0.9. So it's according to the statistics that they did and their own self-imposed guidelines, it's highly reliable. Oop, I just somehow advanced very far ahead. Let's get back to where I was. Yep. And all age groups, when I looked at that table, were above 0.8. Alternate forms. So this would be the parallel items. So they used 13 different age intervals in regards to the normative sample, and then did all the conversions. And they found out that the correlation coefficients depicting the relationship between Form A and Form B exceed 0.7. 50% of the coefficients are 0.9 or above, and another 34% are 0.8 to 0.9. So of that, you have 84% of the 13 different age groups are extremely reliable, above 0.8. So then you have 16% that are still within greater than adequate, being 0.6, but not quite above 0.8, above 0.71. And still, when you then put them all together, it's above 0.8 across all age groups. Time sampling, test, retest. 3 states were used, 2 in the middle, right, and Texas. So when I read this, I can't remember which ones they're right here. It was Ohio, Tennessee, and Texas. So they didn't use any states that were on the left or right coast, no real northern states. I don't know why they did that for the time sampling. I would say that was something that they probably could have done a better job with. You could have picked like Texas and a left, coast like a California or a Washington, and tried to spread it out across the nation overall. But they didn't. It was kind of all in that center area, and maybe there's a reason for that I'm not aware of. So they did this over time. Let's read how they did this. Collected on 30 elementary school children living in Ohio, 10 in Tennessee, 9 different high school students attending various public schools in Texas. These were the ranges that they did. The intervening time was 2 weeks. Subtest standard scores and quotients were correlated as follows. I think it's on the next slide, but it didn't seem like this was a really big aspect to them validating their reliability. Maybe this isn't something that they highly value. Let's go back to that. So the resulting coefficients are consistently large enough to support strongly the idea that the GORD-4 has acceptable test-retest reliability. That was the end result of the data that was presented. So according to them, they did a good job. Inter-score differences. I thought this was interesting because they just used 2 scores. So to do this, 2 individuals score a set of tests independently, and the correlation between scores yields a relational index of agreement. In the case of the GORD-4, 2 members of the ProEd research staff independently scored a set of 30 completed protocols, and the protocols were drawn randomly from the children in the normative sample. So they had good data from it in that these were the correlation coefficients, but they only used 2 of their own employees, and we don't know if those 2 employees, we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they were the ones who created the test, if they've been working together for years and had very similar outlooks on everything. It's just these 2 employees did it. This is what we found out. And I'm not sure how valid that makes that measure of reliability, but they included it statistically, and it was good data, at least as far as, there is some data there. But just in thinking about the project that we did with Luke, excuse me one second, then I don't really, I don't know what that would indicate for that type of thing. I can't delete that, sorry about that. So the summary of reliability results for content, test, retest, score. You can see this is how they summarized it, and most of these are above 90, and I think the lowest one here is 85. So these are very high coefficients correlation. And this was a summary from Dr. Reed at Houston Baptist University. It speaks of the same sort of thing, so comprehension exceeds that. Test, retest, they go into a little bit better mix of this, and I believe this is for the GORD-5, so they did include more states for test retests with the newer version of the GORD. So you had Texas, New York, North Dakota, California, and Nebraska. Very high correlation coefficient, interscore, all very high. Seems like a very reliable test. Regarding validity, type of information, types of scores, subjective opinion of the test's validity. So according to the GORT-4, tests are said to be valid if they do what they are supposed to do. And 3 types of evidence of validity is content description, criterion prediction, and construct identification. So for content, involves procedures involving the systemic examination of the test content to determine whether it covers a representative sample of what is to be measured. First, for the GORT, rationales underlying the GORT-4 story format and content are presented. Second, the validity of the test is ultimately supported by the results of conventional item analysis. And third, the validity of the test is reinforced by the results of differential item functioning analysis. I think a lot of this is above where I'm at. But the rationales. 6 procedures were used to operationalize the story format in order to evaluate individuals' oral reading competencies. So the procedures used were the rationale for using a story, the factors considered in composing the stories, the way in which the comprehension questions were developed, the measurement of fluency on the GORT, the manner in which the stories were sequenced, and the analysis of deviations from print. Conventional item analysis, the second type of analysis. In previous sections, we provided qualitative evidence for the GORT-4's content description validity. So for conventional item analysis, they're going to provide quantitative evidence for content description validity. Wait a second. Yeah, so the qualitative, now it's quantitative. The average difficulty should approximate 50% and have a fairly large dispersion. Items distributed between 15 and 85% are generally considered acceptable. A table that was included in this section demonstrated that median discriminating powers for GORT-4 subsets of all age ranges and tests were all above or equal to 50. I'm not sure I understand what this specifically means, but the criteria that they set out for themselves, or at least that they cited from another study, they met that criteria according to the quantitative work that they did. And in regards to differential item functioning analysis, 2 conventional item analysis techniques previously described. You have item discrimination and item difficulty, traditional and popular. However, no matter how good these techniques are in showing that a test items do in fact capture the variance involved in oral reading ability, they are still incomplete. They cite this study on going further and performing statistical tests for item bias, otherwise known as differential item functioning. So item bias is diff. Said to exist when examinees of the same ability level but from different racial or gender groups perform differently on the same item. Evidence indicates that one group has an advantage over another. 140 comparisons were made for each of the group pairings, male-female, European versus non-European, etc., and a significance level of 0.001 was chosen. I'm not sure I understand that significance level, but it seems pretty low. So I assume that that means there's a narrow tolerance in what can be differing answers to these questions. So of the things that they, or the people or groups that they compared, this resulted in a total of 560 comparisons, only 9 of which were found to be statistically significant at the tolerance level that they set. From that, they conclude that the test is non-biased in regards to gender, race, and ethnicity. And the criterion, it should correlate with other tests that are known or presumed to measure all of the aforementioned abilities that we previously mentioned. All of the coefficients are high. And so for the criterion measures, the GORT 4 and 3 correlated with the grade diagnostic reading test, silent reading test, test of word reading efficiency, the Iowa test of educational development, California achievement tests, diagnostic achievement batteries, the Woodcock reading mastery, and the wide range achievement test with these criterion measures for rate, accuracy, fluency, etc. Previously, things that we talked about. 0.6 being adequate. The only one below 0.6 in regards to the correlation coefficients is right here. The others, the fluency, the oral reading quotient, all are very comparable. A little low on the comprehension. And third, the hypotheses are verified by logical or empirical methods. 9 basic constructs thought to underline the GORT 4 and 9 related testable questions are discussed in the remaining part of this. So these are the 9 construct identification validity aspects to the test itself. The GORT 4 should strongly be correlated to the age, ability, reading is a type of language, correlate significantly to spoken language, etc. So these 9 things should correlate to the test itself. Each of these 9 constructs was subjected to testing with good results as determined by the examiner manual standards, each having its own methodology, rationale. A lot was included in this section of the test. So just to kind of give an overview right here, in that the test appears to be extremely valid, extremely reliable, with correlation coefficients all very high. To list any and all types of scores available through this testing instrument and provide the descriptive terms, record of GORT 4 scores. So it is going to measure rate, accuracy, fluency, comprehension scores for each story, using basals and ceilings to determine the fluency and comprehension scores. It's going to yield sums, total scores, converted to standard scores, percentiles, age and grade equivalents, using the tables included. Standard scores, percentiles are in Appendix B, age and grades in D, standards in A. Kind of like previous tests that we had already reviewed for the examples in our discussion board. Sum of fluency, comprehension standard scores, converted to overall percentiles, oral reading quotients. So, for example, they gave here Chris's total fluency score of 60 converts to a percentile 50, a standard score of 10. The comprehension total score of 21 converts to a percentile and a standard score. Sum the 2 standard scores for a total, and then convert that to a percentile of 27 and an oral reading quotient of 91. All right, I'm back. To continue where we left off, so again, you've seen this table, rate and accuracy becomes fluency, fluency and oral reading comprehension become the oral reading quotient, all described with raw scores, standard scores, percentiles, age and grade equivalents, Modifications and accommodations. What, if any, modifications and/or accommodations to the test or test administration are allowable according to the test publisher? There were no modifications or accommodations described in the examiner's manual. And so I believe what that means is, since it is a norm referenced and validated test, modifications and accommodations are not discussed, then the GORT 5 should be given without accommodations or modifications. And if it is given with accommodations or modifications, then it cannot be expected to give reliable and valid information. I don't necessarily think that doesn't mean that the information won't be useful under certain circumstances, but it can't be expected to be comparable to the norm sets. Is this test suitable, or can it be adapted for students with limited English proficiency? And what does the manual say about using this assessment tool to evaluate this population? It is not suitable for students with limited English proficiency, as the GORT manual does not address this population or issue. I would think that it could be useful for English language learners with some English language capability to give valuable data regarding their levels of ability. However, the context of results could only be used as a way of finding a teaching level. This is just my opinion. It's not going to give valid data regarding the student's true language capabilities. The price, found it on the publisher's website. The fifth, the GORT 5 complete kit, is $289, and these are the components included: the examiner's manual, student book price, A and B forms, and I'm not sure, oh yeah, it does read that. There's 25 included for both A and B forms. Examiner qualifications. Are you currently qualified to administer this test? So the GORT 4 manual, the following defines the examiner's qualifications. Examiners who give and interpret the GORT 4 should have some formal training in assessment. Supervised practice in using reading tests is also desirable. This special training can be obtained by enrolling in college courses devoted to assessment, workshops, or other sources of training. This is pretty nonspecific. Does not appear that any credentials are mandatory for performing the GORT 4 assessment. The manual does read that before giving it, you should consult your local school policies, state regulations, and position statement of professional organizations regarding the use of tests. Review of the test reveals that I would not feel comfortable doing this test without significant experience, using it multiple times, getting some advice from someone who was very familiar with it on what I'm doing wrong, etc. Seem to be well designed to follow, approximate administration and scoring time. So according to the examiner's manual, it can usually be given in about 15 to 45 minutes, depending upon the student's reading ability. It's best administered one session. 2 are sometimes required. The administration, scoring, and interpretation seem fairly straightforward. I would like to practice it. The GORT 4 appears to be easier in that there are not open-ended comprehension questions. The GORT 5 has open-ended comprehension questions, thereby making the test more interpreter subjective. So for the GORT 5, there isn't an A, B, C, D to pick from. For the comprehension questions, you have to take the student's words and fit it in the box. Read and summarize at least one objective review of the test. This is what I found from Clemson University. It is a test review of the 5th edition of the GORT by Anna Hall and Rory Tannenbaum. This is an academic publication that was submitted to Clemson University's Tiger Prints. I guess it's their own proprietary academic submission mechanism. So it is a comprehensive assessment of, according to them, children's oral reading skills, measuring grade accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. Provides teachers with valuable information to identify specific reading strengths and weaknesses. Multiple scores, multiple possible reasons for reading difficulties, takes into consideration people from 6 to 23 years old. Percentiles, scaled scores make it easy to share information. It is reliable and valid. The normative sample was large and diverse. According to them, ample training time between 3 to 6 hours is needed due to the detailed methods of MISCU analysis and measuring multiple skills in one assessment. And that 3 to 6 hours is for even those who are trained professionals who are just new to using that tool. Practice is also necessary. In terms of weaknesses, the following concerns about the GORT-5 should be noted. According to this academic publication, one of the major changes from the GORT-4 to the GORT-5, as was previously mentioned, was the use of open-ended comprehension questions instead of multiple choice. So these open-ended questions may be scored inconsistently based on the variability in answers that students provide. There's also a concern about the effect that timed reading may have on a student's overall reading performance. Some students may feel anxious when told to read quickly, thereby producing more error and miscues than in a natural setting. And according to this publication, the GORT-5 lacks validity evidence related to response processes and consequences of testing. So I think in and of itself, though, testing affects outcomes. So there is going to be, with any test, some consequences of testing. But I'm not sure what they were specifically looking for in regards to validity evidence for that. Overall, the GORT-5, they say, is a thorough oral reading assessment with sound psychometric properties, and when it's given by properly trained professionals, can help diagnose students with reading difficulties and inform administrators and policymakers on the effectiveness of interventions. It provides valuable information. Chose that publication because it was a university publication with 2 authors, one of which had a PhD and is a member of the university's Department of Education. There does not appear to be any financial interest between the author, as none was disclosed, and it was submitted to a university-sponsored publication site for public use. That covers all of the items that were listed in the assignment. Here is my sources. So we have the examiner's manual, the publication, a PowerPoint that I took a look at in regards to a couple slides, ProEd's website for the pricing, and this was another just interesting academic assessment source that made a couple good points. Thank you very much, and have a good day.